Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Managing of Change. Can you all hear me? Yes? Bauchi, Chen, Shen, Hang. Okay, thank you very much for your response. So you can hear me loud and clear. Now, before I start the lesson proper, a couple of announcements. First announcement, I realized that some of you didn't have the PowerPoint slides. It's partly my fault because your program manager wrote to me, I have to load those slides in two locations. And I think I've only loaded in one location. I forgot that there are two batches in this class, I think 33 and 34. And I loaded in one of the batches, but I forgot the other batch. I wasn't too sure about that, but your program manager has reminded me of that. And I've uploaded both batches. So please make sure that you have received or you can see the PowerPoint slides of those slides that I'm showing you on the screen. Because I will also upload my notes. Usually I do that every week. Once I'm finished for the week, I'll upload the notes. So does everyone have your slides now? Anyone without the slides? Is it all clear? I uploaded it last night. Everyone got it? Whichever group I did not load the slides to, I hope everyone has it. If you don't, please let me know and I'll go and recheck again. Okay. The second announcement is I wrote to your UCD lecturer, Rosa Chun, and I asked her about the assignment, what you're supposed to do. She wrote back to me this morning and she said the case study that you should look at is the BTS, the BTS and the Army. But she told me not to worry about it because she said she will cover that in the last lesson. You have one final session with the UCD lecturer after me. You have one final session. So she said she will take care of it. So for all intents and purposes, I will not talk about the assignment, all right? Because she wants to take responsibility for that, and I'll just leave it to her. So in my case, what then is I will take responsibility for the exam. So what I'm talking about is what you will be tested on. So I hope I've made myself very clear, okay, on those two issues. One, the slides, I've uploaded them, and I believe everyone now has those slides. The second thing is on the assignment. The assignment will now be taken care of by your UCD lecturer, not me. So I will now focus only on the lectures and what you will be tested in for the exam. Okay? All right. So the slides are there for you to read. I don't have to go through the slides. I will now build my case on this topic, which is from chapter 10 of your recommended text. And the topic is on power, politics, and stakeholder management. So we are expanding on what we spoke about last week. So let me quickly summarize for you what we did last week. Okay, and then let me bring out today's notes. So at least you know what we are talking about. So in yesterday's lecture, so today is day 2, lecture 2, day 2. So in yesterday's lecture, we looked at, okay, so this is lecture 1. So in lecture 1, what we looked at is we looked at leadership task. Okay, we looked at what leaders are supposed to do. We looked at the importance of promoting a shared sense of direction. We looked at removing obstacles and also creating conditions that empower others to implement change. So this is basically, amongst other things, this is what we looked at yesterday afternoon. Now today, in lecture 2, what we are going to look at, okay, there are a few learning outcomes I want to achieve. I want to achieve in today's lesson. One is what leaders can do to increase their ability to influence others. We will look at this. What can they do? All right. We spoke about, influence as an important part of trying to implement change. And then I'm going to introduce to you a new concept today, which is stakeholders. So we need to identify stakeholders. Okay, identify which stakeholders should be taken into account when you make a change. All right, we will look at that. And finally, what I'd like to talk about is decide how best to manage stakeholders. So these are the 3 things I hope to achieve in today's lesson. All right, this is what I want to achieve. Now, I've come up with this term. Well, it's not my term. It's just something that I took off from your book, but it's commonly used, which is the term stakeholder. Now, before I talk about stakeholders, maybe I should ask you some questions. Questions about you. Okay. First question. Have you been through any change in your life? Anyone? Have you been through any change? Zhao Yinan, Su Qi, Lin Pei Qi, Guo Yue, Fu Mengdi, Hao Si. Anyone has gone through any change? Or you don't think you have been through any change? Change need not always happen in organization. So Wei Ting has been through a change. Okay? Lin Pei Qi has been through a change. So how did you feel? Or what did you do when you go through that change? How did you manage that change? What did you go through? Did you feel anxious? Did you feel frustrated? Did you feel angry? How do you feel? I'm not asking for what change you went through. My basic question was, you've been through a change. So Pei Ting, insecure. So Piao Jindan has been through a change and she feels insecure. So we all go through these processes. Change is not something which only happens in organizations, but our focus is on organization. Okay, so Wei Ting says before the change, you felt anxious and you feel fresh and free, which is good. All of us go through change. All right, when you move from one country to another country, especially some of you, when you pursue an education and education in a higher institution, that in itself is a change. A lot of us focus on the outcome. We focus on the outcome of getting a degree. And people always ask me, what was one change you went through which changed your life, changed your way of thinking? A friend of mine asked me that question last week over lunch. We were having lunch, and he asked me this question. We were talking about things in general. And I told him, I said, the one decision I made or the one change I went through, which changed how I looked at life, is going to university. The people I met, my professors, how they influenced me, both for good and bad. Do not think it always has to be good. It can also be bad, but it changes you in many different ways. And I'm grateful for that. So I do the same thing for my daughters. My daughters are not my own daughters. They're not my biological daughters. I actually adopted them because I married very late. So I adopted them from, Indonesia, from a poor family. But now when I look at them, they've gone through a lot of change for the better. I'm very proud of them. I like to talk about them. When I talk about certain examples, I usually use them as an example because they were, from my perspective, for them is when I made the change for them. That means you can look at me as a leader. They are stakeholders in that change because they are undergoing change, but I have to make sure that when they come out from that change, that they become more responsible, they become diligent, hardworking. This was what I was expecting them to go through because I went through the same thing. And I always used to tell them, getting the degree is easy, but changing your mind through that experience is the more difficult part. You have to absorb all your influences, be your own counsel, and decide what is best for you. And the best may not always be the easy thing to do. All right? I'm very proud. They're now married. The only problem I have with them is they haven't given me grandchildren. And I told you about that yesterday. But that's the only thing. But other than that, they're wonderful people. So they are stakeholders and I'm the leader, if you want to look at it that way. So now let's define what's a stakeholder. How would you define a stakeholder? Now, I spoke in general terms, but we are more interested in an organization. How would you define a stakeholder in an organization? A stakeholder can be any individual or group who can affect or is affected by the achievement of organizations' objectives. Organizations may have a number of objectives. I went through such a change. I was working in a small American company, and that company was bought over by a bigger company. It was a takeover. It was a change. Was I affected? Of course I was. Did I feel good about it? No, I did not. The objective of the organization at that time was to merge with this other bigger organization. And I just felt that people who were in the original small American company were not well taken care of. I read about the change And you might be surprised to see this or hear this. I read about this takeover in the newspaper. Can you believe it? Because it's a big engineering company buying over a very small but very good company. And I read about it in the papers when I was working in Taiwan. I was doing a project in Taiwan. The company sent me there to do the project, and I read about it in the Taiwanese newspaper, the English newspaper. And I showed it to my counterpart, and I said, I didn't know we were being bought over, but that's why I read it. And when I came back to the office, I asked my boss. And I asked my boss, I said, do you know about this? And he himself was in the dark. He didn't know about it until the day before the company was bought over. We were all affected. But I don't think how it affected us can be explained because we were all very angry that we were not informed. The company is still there. The company who bought us over is still there, is growing bigger, but now they are having problems because everyone who were part of that company, we included, within a space of about 2-3 years, we left. I was in the company for 2 years and then we were bought over. So the third year we were bought over and I left in the 5th year. All of us left. I think the only person I knew who stayed back was the person who was a colleague of mine. He was, over the years, he became engineering director. But then he retired recently and we still meet. So anyone who is affected by any organization's objective can be called a stakeholder. Now, when we look at organizations can be conceptualized as a collection of constituencies. Constituencies refers to, different groups of people, different, teams, departments, all these are constituencies. We shouldn't be too concerned about the size. Size can vary. 2 persons can form a constituency. So when you look at organizations as constituencies, each one of them, they may pursue their own objectives, each pursuing their own objectives. All right? Now, yesterday, when I asked, what do you want? What are you looking for? Getting a degree. Some of you said, you want a career. Some of you want more money. Now, you become part of a constituency in an organization. So those who want money, you'll form a constituency. Those who want a career, you want to get promoted, you may look at another constituency. But being part of these different constituencies, what will happen is each one of you, individuals and groups, you will try to influence each other in the pursuit of self-interest. You're interested about yourself. You want to make more money. You wanted to grow in your career. Anyone thinks about the people using your products or your services? How do they feel about your product? Do they like your product or they don't like your product? Do they have complaints about your product? The consumers themselves They're worried about the product. They are self-interested too. I paid this much for this smartphone and it doesn't work. They think about this out. Do they think about what would have caused this problem? Generally, we don't. We are all interested in ourselves. Understand why we have problems in organizations, why it is difficult to change. It's because of all this. Others in the organization, some may be motivated to defend their status quo. So when we say status quo, if you are a manager having a nice car, a nice house, good salary, and if I say, look, your position is redundant, I'm the change manager, he will fight me tooth and nail. Why? Self-interest, but he wants to defend the status quo. They will make statements like, look, my job is important. Without me, the company would not have grown. They will always use history as justification for the job that they are doing. But what we have forgotten is it's not about history. History brought you here. But the future is more important. Where would we be in the future? I have a friend. He was managing director of a Swedish company. And this was before the pandemic. And I meet him on a regular basis. I did not meet him during the pandemic. I was just thinking about him this morning. Maybe I should call him up. I do not know what is he doing. But before the pandemic, I met him for lunch. And he told me because he was fired from his job. He was managing director. The chairman of the board flew in and told him, I'm sorry, we don't need you anymore. In one day, they just paid him his severance package. That was it. And I asked him, I said, did you see this coming? And he said, Morgan, I did not. There was a lot of reorganization in the company, and I thought my job would be safe, but it was not safe. I wasn't looking at what was happening in the environment. So a lot of us, as we move up in the organizations, we become complacent. We think we are here because of the decisions we made. Nothing can touch us. You cannot be further from the truth. Your position becomes very precarious because there will always be others in an organizations, others who may see change as an opportunity to improve their position. Right? Then there would be a small group of people. There will be a small group of people who engage, fighting the organization's pursuit of its objective for ideological reasons, especially when they fear that a change may be inconsistent with their values. So some may engage in political action, especially when they fear that change may be inconsistent with their values. All right? And when I went through that change, when I was working in that company, I was young. I was probably just maybe slightly older than you are. I was 25, 26, around that age. When I left, I was in my early 30s. So I belonged to the last group. because the first company I worked in, that was the first company after graduation. That company, according to me, based on my experience, was the best company I've ever worked in so far, or worked with. It was a small American company. I was an engineer, a systems engineer, and there were about 8 to 10 systems engineers. And we were given a lot of autonomy, responsibilities to do our job. Nobody monitored us, but we were all responsible, and the company made money. And at the end of the year, whatever the company made, it was shared with everyone. And I thought that was a great company. If we had a problem, I could call on anyone to help me out. And they would willingly help me out. Why? Whatever profits we made, it was shared between us. That was our value. But when this company took us over, yes, to compensate for that loss in income, they raised our salaries. But we never felt that belonging anymore. And there were others from this bigger company who saw an opportunity to improve their position. So they came over and they assumed senior positions. While people in the old company, the small American company, they were fighting for their status quo. They were happy with what they had. They had nice houses, big cars, good salaries. They were defending their status quo. And all of us were trying to influence each other in the pursuit of self-interest. That's how things take place. Now, a lot of the things that takes place here, if you are the change manager, it can undermine efforts to bring about change. So all of the above can undermine efforts to bring about change. All right? So how can people undermine change? Again, these are examples, these are things I have seen. What might happen is some organizational members may be concerned about the collection of information for diagnosis. Okay, could weaken their position. So what do? Right? They don't give you information. All right? They may not give you information because they feel that if they give you information, that could weaken them. And this is where we get things like statements like information or knowledge is power. All right? So they may not wish to disclose information which had previously protected them with political advantage. When someone withholds information from you, this is what they do. So as a change manager, you need to be aware of. When people say they'll give you information and then day one comes, the week one comes, the month comes, and you still don't get the information, it simply means that they don't want to give you that information. Some people will just put it off, thinking that you would forget it. I make a note of all this. Excuse me, yeah? I make a note of all this. Who is not giving me information and who is giving me information? Because people don't want to change. They think if I give too much information, you might question me. That's what information does. Why are all politicians afraid to make decisions right now? Why are in some countries people are trying to control the internet, monitor the internet? They're afraid what's out there. Because if everyone can share information, you would know what is out there. And you can use it to great effect. You can question it. I was watching, the news this morning, and there has been some evidences produced in Congress in the US about what Trump did. And one reporter was asking the Justice Department, the US Justice Department, okay, he made a statement, all right? The head of the Justice Department made a statement saying that no one is above the law. And then this reporter asked him, would that include the former president of the United States? Can you prosecute him? And then this head of the Justice Department, he repeated, he said, you have not heard me. I said, no one is above the law. So these are the kind of things you must be aware of in systems, in countries, in companies. Some companies are run in a very autocratic way, just like countries, and some companies are run in a democratic way, just like countries. And we need to be aware of this. So as a change manager, what can then we do? Before I explore that, anyone has any questions on anything I have said? Any questions, anyone? Excuse me. Piao Jin Dun, no questions. How about the rest? Is it all very clear? Okay, let's continue. Now, as a change manager, you have to know what is power and you have to know what is influence. That's what I am going to talk about right now. Power and influence. What is power? Anyone wants to answer that question? What is power? Anyone? What is power? Yes. The key word there is influence. So when you talk about, no, power is not authority. I'll explain this further. Power is like what Piao Jin Dan has mentioned, how much you can influence the other. That is power. All right. Everything else that you have mentioned, bringing in resources, control, authority. Now, if you have power, you may have that. But even with all that, you cannot influence someone, you don't have power. And that's what I'm going to explore right now. Power can be defined as the ability to influence another person's behavior. Okay? That is power. And I mentioned this yesterday. If your mom can influence your behavior, she is a leader, but she has got power. All right? Now, if she cannot influence your behavior, she's got no power. I know I can influence my daughter's behavior. I have power over them. But likewise, they can also influence my behavior. For example, I have interesting discussions with my daughters. I will discuss things like, LGBT issues. They are quite open about it. For me, it is, I come from a very conservative background and I'll talk to them. I mean, I'm not against LGBT issues, but I am kind of curious how my daughters, who are of a very much younger age, what they think about it. But having conversations with them has kind of changed the way I behave towards LGBT people. I accept them. There's nothing wrong with them, I think. All right. But if you had asked me the same question, let's say maybe when I was in my 20s, I may look at them differently, maybe in an adverse way, which when I look back right now, I'm a little bit ashamed. And my daughters had the power to influence how I think and how I behave. It is, you can say, it is the ability to cause others to perform actions they might not otherwise perform, like in an organization or in a team, in a department. If someone can influence you in a different way, which on your own you might not do, then that person has power. All right. We go through a phase in life, when we are teenagers, your parents might be shouting at you. And during that phase, usually it's quite difficult to have power over your children. Fortunately for me, even though my daughters, when they were teenagers, they resisted what I told them to do, they listened, maybe grudgingly. But now when I look at them, because anytime I don't scold them. I just tell them, please, things like make your bed. When you get up in the morning, don't leave it as it is, make your bed. It tells you that you are responsible for your actions. Clean your plates. When you finish eating, return those plates. Okay, wash your plates, wash your clothes. All I'm teaching them is responsibility. And it is difficult to teach those kind of actions to very young people. There's always someone to clean up for them. But I made my daughters to do that on their own. I had power over them. Okay? But when you have a relationship, it is inherent in any relationship. So it is inherent in any relationship in which one person or group is dependent on another. Right? Now, those in authority. Now, you mentioned authority. Those in authority are those who are seen to have a legitimate right to influence others. Right? May have a legitimate right to influence others. So for me, being the father to two daughters, I have a legitimate right to influence them. But how I influence them becomes important, because power is not always legitimate. Now, if I used to talk to them, I may raise my voice, but I'll never show them that I'm angry. I'll just tell them, raise my voice. In a raised voice manner, I'll tell them what to do. But I will never hit them, because if I hit them, I've abused power. And the same is true in a company. If a boss fires someone because he doesn't like the guy, he has abused his power. But if he gives a warning to the other person for not performing something, that is legitimate. He's trying to influence the other person, but if the other person doesn't listen, give a warning. And if he still doesn't listen, give a second warning. And if he still doesn't listen, then you fire the other person. You have given every opportunity for the other person to change. If that person doesn't change, you have to follow protocol. You don't want to abuse power. Influence is always about power in action. You have to follow the rules. Like what I said earlier, no one is above the law here. You cannot take power in your hands. Right? But on the other hand, you will also see people in organizations, some individuals in organizations may not have authority, but are able to exercise considerable influence on others. And we will look at these sources of power a little bit later. They may not have authority. I'll give you an example. The second company I worked in after graduation, I was working for another MNC. First one was an English MNC, and then it became, it was an American MNC, and then it became a European MNC. It had offices in Zurich, And then my second company I worked in was an English MNC. Now, in that English MNC, I worked with a technical manager. He was not very high in the organization, but he had a lot of experience. But he has the capability to influence others because he knows a lot. Now, Wei Ting talked about ability. We'll come to that in a little while. If you have ability, if you have experience, people will listen to you. All right? So be aware of this. So you need not be in a position of authority. You may not have a position, but if you have knowledge, if you have ability, if you have experience, people will listen. All right? Now, let me finish this. Where one individual
experience.
If someone's mic is on, Shi-Wei, I am muting you because your mic is on, Shi-Wei. Now, when you come in late, please make sure that your mic is off because I can hear the background noise. Shi-Wei, remember that. If you decide to come in late, switch off the mic. Okay, Shi-Wei, are you there? Can you acknowledge me, please, Shi-Wei? All right. I distract
Hi,
you.
sir. I'm not late because my internet was stopped.
Okay, then switch off the mic. I could hear the background noise.
Oh, really?
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right. So where one individual attempts to affect the behavior of a group without using coercive power. Without using coercive power, no threats, no demands, adverse demands. When you don't use coercive power, you don't use dictatorial powers, we describe the effort as leadership. And I spoke about this yesterday. Is that all okay, everyone? Is everyone clear about this? Anyone has any questions on this? Any questions? Wei Ting, Liu Chong, Wang Wan Ying, Wu Wen Ye, Ying Zhao, Xiao Jin Dan. Is it all very clear? Okay, good. Let's now look at sources of power. As a change manager, you must know this when you walk into an organization. What are the sources of power? All right. So now I'm talking about sources of power. Now, there are two sources of power. Let's look at the first one. The first one is known as, interpersonal power. Now, interpersonal power can again be divided into 5 categories. What are the 5 categories? A, we spoke about this earlier. Legitimate power. Legitimate power comes about because of your position, ability to influence, because of position. So the position you hold, whether you're a managing director, whether you are a manager, whether you are a senior engineer, you can influence people under you. A lot of you, when I asked you yesterday, who do you admire as a leader? A lot of you mentioned business leaders, Jack Ma, Chairman Mao, people who have positions, Elon Musk. Yes, they have power, but a lot of their power stems from their position. Now, when you have legitimate power, you can also have reward power. Why do people look up to these people? Those people that you have mentioned yesterday? Because they also have the ability to reward a follower for compliance. If you do as they tell you, you'll be rewarded. I call them the hangers-on, yeah? People who hang around you hoping that, you'll get some tidbits, you get some of the spares. And that's the reason why you always see all this group of people hanging around this others who have this legitimate power. I've never seen, someone in a senior position without hangers-on. They will always be surrounded by others. I've never seen them alone. Why? They have the ability to reward. But on the flip side, they also have the ability to to punish you. Which is the power to punish. All right. Now, a friend of mine, some years ago, in fact, many years ago, maybe more than, I don't know, maybe, yeah, many years ago, she told me, she said, she was attending a dinner. This was a dinner. This was not a formal dinner. This was a dinner. And then Lee Kuan Yew walked into this banquet. And I think by that time, I think he was not prime minister. I can't remember what he did, but it's towards the later part of his life. And then she told me everyone stood up out of respect. And I just asked her one question. I said, is it out of respect or is it out of fear? And she was stumped by the question. She looked at me, she said, maybe it is out of fear, Morgan. I really do not know. Or it could be both. You never know. But Lee Kuan Yew had the power to punish. If you go against him, he may throw you into prison. That is a possibility, which he did during his early years of leadership. Anyone who went against him ended up in prison. But that doesn't mean he didn't have legitimate power. He had legitimate power, but that power is with reward and cohesion. Now, someone mentioned ability earlier. Now, that would come under expert power. Expert power is special expertise that is highly valued. So if you have some knowledge, and remember I told you that Englishman, that technical manager, now he had a lot of knowledge. Even though the company had managing directors, marketing directors, and his door, there was no title. His door was always open. His door had no title. But when the CEO of the company came to see us, the first person he will go and see is that technical manager. Why? Because he had special expertise. He developed some of the company's products, some of these best products, and they treated him with respect. And I always admired that guy, an old Englishman, yeah? Unfortunately, he passed away of cancer, about 10 years ago, unfortunately. But if you ask me, people I've worked with, who do I respect? He is one of those few people I respected very highly, because he will always use influence. He would never say things like, do as I tell you. If he feels that you're not convinced, he will try to invite you to his office and explain to you, how it should be done. He will go into the basics. And I always admired him for that. So that is expertise, expert power. Then you have referent power. And what is referent power? Now, this is the charisma of the person. Okay, the person maybe he's very eloquent in his speech. Usually you will find referent power, amongst artists, actors, singers. So now you can understand why a lot of people fall for them. You are doing a case study, BTS and the army. I think BTS is a boy band. All right. So they have referent power. Are they good in what they do? Maybe, but would you call it special expertise? a lot of the things that they do, I remember as a teenager watching Michael Jackson do it. Okay, not that I valued Michael Jackson's expertise, that requires a lot of training, but this is something that anybody can learn. Charisma, how to be charismatic. I have a funny story to tell you. There was one time, my client was kind enough to put me and my business partner, onto a first class in a plane, flying from actually Taiwan, Taipei to Singapore. And in this first class, there was a boy band. I can't remember their name here, EFSA or whatever. Yeah, I can't remember. But I do not know them, and my friend neither. Neither of us knew who these people were. These four guys, who they were. So they started singing when we were trying to sleep. It was a late night flight. They were trying to sing. And my friend got upset because we had a very long week, at a project site. And he got upset. He stood up and he told them off. He said, please, we are trying to sleep here. Can you please keep quiet? And they all shut up. They got red in the face and they just kept quiet. And they never uttered a sound after that. We only realized who they were when we landed. We saw all these young people, mostly young girls, at the airport welcoming them. And then we realized who these guys were. And we told them off. So that's my story, infamous story, yeah? But that's what happened. So I thought it's a funny story, yeah? But that's what happened. So they have charisma. And a lot of people fall for that charisma. Now, when we look at this, when we look at these different sources of power, these 5 bases of interpersonal power, okay, so 5 bases of interpersonal power can be divided into 2 major categories. All right, they can be divided into 2 major categories. We're still talking about interpersonal power, yeah? Now, what are these 2 major categories? One is personal, the other one is organizational. Let's look at organizational first. Legitimate reward and cohesive power are primarily prescribed by the organization. All right? It is prescribed by the organization. So if I want to change legitimate power, I can indirectly influence reward power and cohesive power. How do I do that? I can transferring the person, rewriting the job description, or restructuring the organization can change a person's legitimate power. So when we were bought over in the first company, when we were bought over, it changed the kind of power we had. And a lot of us were upset. There were others coming from the bigger organization to take over positions of legitimate power in that merged entity. And we were asking, why are we not there? Is it because we are a smaller company? We are in a subordinate position? What is happening? So all these things can be changed. Do not think, position is valid forever. A position is transient. It can disappear after a while. And we have to manage that. Okay? We have to manage that. On the other hand, expert and referent power are very personal. They are the result. They are the result of an individual's personal expertise or style and is grounded in the person and not the organization. So this is what will happen. So before we look at the second type of power, I've only talked about the first type. So if you are the change manager, what kind of power do you want to have? Anyone? What source of power would you like? I asked you this question yesterday. If you want to have a transition manager, who would you appoint as a transition manager? Now we're getting a little bit a different discussion. So if you are a change manager, you want to appoint someone, who would you appoint as a change manager? Anyone? Piao Jin Dun, Wei Ting Pan, Ing Zhao, Liu Chong. Anyone has any answer to that? Well, if you are a change manager, it's great if you have expert or referent power. It's great. People look at your expertise or people look at your charisma and say, I want to follow this person. Okay? But of course, if you have, with that expert and referent power, if you have legitimate power, that's great too. That's doubly great. But first and foremost, build your expert and referent power. But let's say you are a change manager and you come across people in the organization who can be experts or who can be charismatic, but you will also find people who are legitimate, who kind of resist your approach to change. What do? What you then have to do is, with the expert or referent power, you have to do everything you could to get them on your side. For legitimate power, it's easy. You can rewrite the job description. You can move them out to a different department. But what is important to you is win over those expert and reference power. That is important, right? So you should be, on all accounts, you should be trying to build up your expert and reference power. Do not go into an organization and say, I want this position. If you don't have reference or expert power, whatever position you have is not going to help you in the long run. You may be stuck there for the rest of your life. All right? People may not even want to listen to you. Right? Reference power, not all of us may have it, charisma. But expert power is something you can build over time. It takes time, but you can build your expertise. Okay, so before we go on to the next stage, the second source of power, anyone has any questions? We'll do this and then we'll take a break. Anyone has any questions? Owen, Liu Kong, Eng Zhao, Piao Jin Den, Bairu, Bai Chi. There's so many of you. Yeah, there's 77 of you. Okay, I can't go through the whole list. I'll just call the list according to what I see. I mean, I only see the same names over and over again, but I hope those whose names do not show up, I hope you're listening. Okay, no questions. Now, so I've spoken about one source of power, interpersonal power. Now let's look at the second source of power. The second source of power is known as structural and situational power. And this power comes from, okay, three things, all right? It comes from three things. You have access to resources. You have information, and you can offer support with that information. And you have the ability to get cooperation from others for whatever reason. You could be a nice person, or maybe you just are charismatic. But this is structural or situational power. All right, access to resources. Let me give you an example. All right, when I was doing my national service, one of the things I had to do was to arrange transport. I have to arrange transport for the troops. Now, it's not easy. Why? Because everyone wants transport to bring their troops to somewhere else. But the person who was responsible for the transportation roster was a corporal, a low-ranking appointment. Okay, we call him the transport clerk. But if you're good to him, you can get a lot of things done. If you're polite to him, you can get a lot of things done. If I go to him and I say, Corporal Tan, how are you? Haven't seen you for quite a while. You want to meet me for lunch? I've got something important to talk to you. I'm inviting him out for lunch. At the officer's mess, you know, if you want to bring another rank to an officer's mess, only an officer can do it. Of course, he loves it. I'm treating him at my own level. And then at lunch, I'll tell him, Corporal Tan, I need about 10 trucks this weekend. I've got to bring my troops to the range. He said, no problem, sir. Consider it done. He has access to resources. All it took me was just a little bit of politeness and maybe the cost of a lunch. That's it. But if you order him around simply because he is a corporal rank, do you think he will help you? Be careful. This is also true for receptionists in companies. One of my bosses told me a long time ago, Morgan, when you go into any company, be good to the receptionist. Why? They have access to their bosses. They will give you information. Remember their names. Remember their birthdays. Buy them chocolates, flowers on their birthdays. They will give you lots of information. And I saw my boss in action. When he visited one of the clients, he was very friendly with the receptionist, bought some goods, chocolates for her, and she told us who the competition was. We were there for negotiation. She had access to information. You can also have people, maybe because of their reference power or because of their expertise, they have the ability to get cooperation from others. So in this case, you can ask yourself, how do you acquire and exercise power and influence? So if you have this, you can get a lot of things done. Either you have structural or situational power, or if you have information, interpersonal power, you can get a lot of things done. So I asked you earlier, how do you become a good change manager? And I said, maybe one of the things you have to work on is expertise. And not all of us have charisma, but we can work on that. So as a change manager, how do you acquire and exercise power and influence? So let me formalize this discussion. How do we do this? I spoke about expertise, but you also must be driven, you know. So it is important to develop your reputation. Are you seen to be motivated and competent by the change recipients? Do people look up to you? People say, this person knows what he is talking about. All right? You have to be competent. Now, I share this story with everyone, especially students. I went and did my degree, and then I decided to take the degree simply because when I first started work, I actually did work before I went to university. I was working. I realized there were a lot of things that I didn't know, and I was kind of curious. And the person I worked with, you know, my boss, you know, I had a Scottish boss at that time. Now, he recommended that I go and study. He said, Morgan, you know, work isn't everything, money isn't everything, go and study. And I said, why? You know, I said, well, you learn a lot of things, it gives you a different perspective. So he hit the nail right on the head. He didn't say you go and get a degree, you make more money. he knew that what I was going through. I was doing a lot of things, and whenever I asked any questions, people will say, just do it the way it is. No one would give me an explanation. I was very curious. So he recommended a university, and that's how I ended up studying in the UK. I went to the UK to do my engineering degree. But then when I got my degree and I worked in the first company, an American company, that was the beginning of a nightmare. What do I mean by a nightmare? Everyone will test you. Your subordinates will test you. Your peers will test you. Your bosses will test you. Your customers will test you. What are they testing you on? To see whether you are competent. So don't be surprised when you get your degree. Do not think, by having a legitimate position, people will not challenge you. In any MNC, people will challenge you. They want to see what you're made of. And if you cannot convince them of what you know, then you are in serious trouble. So you have to develop your reputation. Okay? Are you seen to be motivated and competent by the change recipients? Now, it could also be that you have resources, position. You could be the son of the founder, for all I care. So you can also develop dependency. Dependency meaning, what do others seek from you? All right? People could be seeking resources. People could be seeking money. People could be seeking position, and so on. They could be seeking these things from you. And how important is it to them? This is dependency. All right? So when you say you want to make more money, you've just shown a sense of dependency. When you say you want a higher position, you have shown a sense of dependency. And what does Maslow's hierarchy of needs talk about dependency? When you're looking for money or position, you're basically looking for security. You are insecure. So this is how the theory is used to explain a lot of things. So you're looking for those people who are dependent on you for some of these things. But you have to evaluate, do they want it because they're insecure? Or is it very important to them because they want to impress their peers, their friends, maybe status? That's dependency, easy to deal with. This is easy to deal with. The first one is difficult. The second one, or the third one, is also difficult. Okay, no, the third one, yeah? The third one is a little bit difficult. Not impossible, but it is difficult. And we call it interdependency. Interdependency is not only about they needing you, but you needing them. You also need them. So you need to identify who are the significant others you need to influence. All right? For example, if I want to influence my wife can be extremely stubborn. I speak to my eldest daughter. If I can convince her, my wife will change. Why? She has a lot of influence on my wife. So similarly, in an organization, There may be people, may not be the people at the top, but there could be the secretary. Maybe it could be the receptionist herself. They could be the significant other you need to influence. So they can then influence the party that you're trying to influence. You need to be able to identify all this. All right? Then what you need to do is number 4. Can you collaborate? All right? Can you collaborate? So we are talking about collaboration here. Can you build better relationships with people you are dependent on to implement the change? They may not need anything from you, but you need them. So this is not interdependency. The first one, dependency, what others seek from you. Interdependency is you need them, they need you. There is a trade-off. But collaboration, the other party may not need you, but you need them. Can you build better relationships with those people to implement the change? All right? So all this involves dependency, interdependency, and collaboration. All this involves negotiation. All right? You need to negotiate to support efforts to implement change. But to negotiate, to implement change involves political awareness and a willingness to involve others in the change. This is what you have to do. Anyone has any questions before we take a break? Any questions, anyone? Waiting? Eng Zhao, Yu Kong, Owen, Kiao Jin Den, Fu Meng Di, Gao Yu, Hao Si, quite a number of you, yeah? It's all very clear. Okay, good. So we'll take a break, and after the break, what we will talk about is stakeholder theories. So stakeholder theories, I will tell you what the theories are. And once I'm done, there are 2 topics I need to cover. One is stakeholder theories, where I'll give you what the theories say. And then we will look at stakeholder management. There is one article, by John Buchanan, referred to in the subject guide. I will talk about what he found in managing stakeholders. So his is more practice. So we look at the theory first, and then we will look at practice or what the researchers have found in practice. So let's take a break. We meet back here again at 5 o'clock. Okay, and then we'll continue. Is that okay, everyone? 5 o'clock, yeah? I think good enough to get a drink, or maybe have something to buy. Okay, so I'll see you in about 20 minutes time. Okay, everyone? Gao Yu, all okay? Uwen, all fine? So I'm going to switch off the mic for a while, and I'm going to go and get myself a drink. Losing my voice. Okay, see you in about 20 minutes time. Hello, everyone. Are we back from our break? Are we all back? Liu Kong, Gao Yu, Zhao Yi Nan, Sun Hao Bu. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, those who are responding, Zhao Luning, Ming, Su Chi, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much for responding. So let's get started. So now we are looking at the other side of the coin. We are looking at the stakeholders. Now, to understand stakeholders, there are a number of theories, or most of the theories that you look at, in your book or maybe what you read, can be grouped into 5 categories. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at each of these categories, stakeholder theories, you know where to look for it. Okay, you can look for it in the book, but you can at least understand how they are categorized. Once I have finished talking about the stakeholder theories, we will look at how things are being done in reality. So we will look at stakeholder management. So for that, I have posted one article for you to read. I will discuss that article so at least you have an understanding of where we stand with stakeholders. Now, stakeholder theories can be divided into 5. First one is known as normative theories. Now, normative theories argue, they argue that moral commitments should provide the basis for managing stakeholder relationships. So when we work with others, when we try to do things with others, your word is your honor. You may have heard terms like this. You should not be using it to promote your own selfish interests. This is what normative theories talk about. It's not about your interests. It's not about managerial interests, individual interests. It's about what you say and have you carried that out. And you might have seen this in, the old leaders, yeah? At the shake of a hand, they'll keep their word, even when there is no contract. Now, why do we do this? Why is this important? Why is it important to keep moral commitments? Because people will look at you and enhance your reputation. They will say things like, this is someone I can trust. This is someone that I don't mind working with. So it generates, I spelled this wrongly, relationships. It generates reputational gains. That attracts resources. That's what the normative theories say. And when you have the resources, you can use them to enhance performance, achieve competitive advantage with the changes that you are trying to make. These are normative theories. You have to act morally. Quite rare nowadays, I must admit. People say one thing and do another. But to be committed morally to someone, especially in this day and age, is difficult. And you don't see many people practicing this. right? But there are theories trying to promote or trying to tell you that this is the way to go. Okay? Now, the other one is the exact opposite, and those are known as instrumental theories. Instrumental theories, what they do is they attend, to the interests of stakeholders to the extent, that those stakeholders can affect the change managers' interests. So this one looks more at stakeholder management. How do you manage the stakeholders so that they can then have an impact on your interests as a change manager or a change agent? It looks at all these things. So you have to be observant to what is around you. You must have what I mentioned earlier before the break. You must have a political awareness of what's happening around you. Now, if you look at something like this, now you might say this is pragmatic. You only deal with people who can help you. That's what it says. So it's pragmatic in the sense, that it focuses attention on those relationships that will affect the success of change. Okay, that's what it looks at. This theory says, okay, first you may have to identify, who will impact you adversely or maybe even positively, identify who those people are, and then work with them. Okay, I remember once, one of the things that I had to do, this was again a long time ago. I was engaged, I think by that time, when I said a long time ago, by that time I was working for myself. But this German company approached me and they said they would like me to investigate this subsidiary in a foreign country. And I said, sure, what do they want me to check? And they said, well, we do not know how, money is being spent, how decisions are being made. What we notice is, we are not getting regular reports. When we try to get into details, we don't seem to get the details. We would like to engage you. And then we would like you to write a report on what this is all about. So basically, I'm not a transition manager. I'm not making a change, to this company. I'm just supposed to collect information and see what happens. So when I went down to this subsidiary, and I don't want to mention the name of the country, where I was, but when I went down to this subsidiary, and sure enough, there was fraud. Fraud in the sense that people were just siphoning money from the company. And it starts right at the top. They always say, rot starts right at the top. And that was what's happening. The managing director, everybody else in that company was stealing from the company. So I didn't even write a report. I just saw the accounts. I flew in like on a Friday, I think, evening or afternoon, and I went to the office, and then I said, can I have a look at your books? I was sent by this person and they gave me the books. I just went to the accounts manager and I said, okay, this is who I am. Can I have a look at the books? And I looked at the books and I saw that there was a lot of cheating or stealing going around. No receipts, nothing. When you run a company, you have to make sure that all this is in order. You will get audited, if not internally, externally. And if it's done externally, and if you do not divulge what is happening, you can get into serious problems. It may not be a civil charge, it could be a criminal charge, and you could end up in prison. But people don't realize it. If they set up a company, they think they can do anything they want. You can't. A company is like a person. So anyway, I called up the boss, the CEO of the company, and I said, this is what I'm seeing. What do you want me to do? I said, there's nothing much for me to write about. I just look at the accounts and I know there's a lot of fraud going on. He said, Morgan, can we appoint you as a transition manager? Well, he didn't use that word. He said, we would like you to take over and make the changes. And I said, well, I must have certain instructions on what I can do. Okay, he said, do whatever you think is necessary. All right. And I said, sure, I'm sure about this. I said, I will do whatever is necessary, but I need time. And I said, what is my duration? How much time do I have to make these changes? I actually had to do it for 2 years. It took me 2 years to make the change. But what did I do? I basically fired a lot of these people because they were stealing. These were criminal charges. They should be lucky that I did not lodge a complaint to the police. They were basically stealing from the company. But anyway, I kept a few of them, people I thought were honest, and one of them was the office boy who ended up being my assistant. I trained him, and he still calls me up. Okay, I left the company a long time ago, but when the contract was over, but he still keeps in touch with me. So that is instrumental theory. We focus on people who can help us to affect the change. And I kept a few of them who were instrumental in making that change. The office boy being one of them. He is very honest. He will give me feedback. I'm interested in that. And then there was a girl I employed, a secretary I employed. She was also very, very good. She was older than I am, but she was very good. She would question me on some of the things that I did, and I had to explain to her why am I doing it. But there were a few people, about 3 or 4 people who were instrumental in turning that company around. And I was kind of proud of that effort, yeah. Unfortunately, it affected my health quite badly at the end of it, and I had to take some time off. All right, because it's hard work. Change management is not easy. But that is instrumental theory. Then you have what is known as resource dependent theories. Now, these theories, what they do is they conceptualize the firm or the organization as being dependent on resources in its environment for growth and survival. Sorry, I just wanted to put SA. Okay. So in this case, you depend on these resources, and the environment could be internal environment within the company, but it can also be external environment. It could be the government. It could be maybe a key supplier. It could even be a client. So all these people provide resources to you. And these resources are essential to make the change for the company to grow. When you use these kind of theories, you're looking at how to make the change to make the company grow. So what you then have to do is you have to attend to those stakeholders who control these resources. Okay? Now, during the course of this module, right, or maybe at the end of this module, I think at the end of the module, I have to make a trip. But I have to make a trip because I have to talk to someone who controls certain resources of information, resources of implementation. He's got the resource to implement the project. So I'm going to meet this person and I'm going to have a chat with this person. How much will it cost? How long will it take? And he is critical in the success of this change because we are making some changes to this company. And if he says, I cannot do this, then I have to start looking for someone who has a similar set of resources. But I'm looking at those resources for growth, not survival. This company, what we are doing is we are trying to duplicate what this company is doing in Australia. We are doing it in a different country, an Asian country, for the first time. So we are looking at resources to implement and whether we can get the expertise locally, whether we can get the resources. I've checked most of the technical resources I think I can get locally, but the expertise, I'm not so sure. All right, I may have to bring them from Australia. So these are the resource-dependent theories. You attend to those stakeholders who gives you or control those resources. All right? Now, then there is another theory known as prospect theory. Prospect theories. Now, prospect theories, what it says is, the actual and psychological values that you attach to an outcome can and do differ. Now, for a lot of you, you're taking a master's program. Now, your psychological value attached to that is that master's degree would give you a certain influence, will give you a certain status, and help you to make money. Now, if you go and work in a company, now how the person who interviews you or how your boss may look at your master's degree can be totally different. He may look at it from the point of view, can you do the job? And this happens to all stakeholders. Do not think all of us look at a certain thing the same way. We all look at things differently. This is known as projection. So the mistake most people make is we think what our value systems is what other people's value systems are. You are wrong. Our value systems are very different from other people's value systems. We are a product of the environment. And that environment molds us, changes us in many different ways. So you have to look at what outcome you want to achieve in the organization, the change outcome, and you must try to understand different people will look at it differently. So first point about prospect theories is it explores that actual and psychological values attributed to an outcome can and do differ. Be aware of it. Don't think all of us think the same way. It's very different. So change managers, if you are a change manager, change managers must be selective about which stakeholders they attend to. There may be people who may almost think like you, but there may be people who may think of it differently, right? Like you watch a movie, I may think it's a great movie. My wife may think it's a terrible movie. Maybe it's not her kind of movie. But if I go and see some of those Marvel movies with her, all those, what is it, Avengers and whatever, I find them boring, but my wife finds them very interesting. So we have different values, even when we look at a movie. And I told her about recently a good movie I saw, and I think she saw it on Netflix, and she said, Morgan, it's a boring movie. I said, it's an interesting movie. So we all have different perspectives, and those perspectives comes about from the values that we attribute. So you as a change manager, you may believe something is happening, right? And this is the outcome you have achieved, but others may view it differently. Now, because of that, you have to attend to different stakeholders in different ways. And that's what the prospect theories tell you. Then you have organizational life cycle theories. Now, organizational life cycle theories, what they do is they basically look at the environment and they say threats and opportunities that could affect the success of a change can vary. Now, because these threats and opportunities that can affect the change can fluctuate, can vary, so resources required to support the change will also vary. Okay, a case in point is, the James Webb Telescope, which NASA launched a few weeks ago. It was conceptualized in the 1980s, and it was only launched a few weeks ago. Now, that's a long time. Okay, that's a long time to design, build, and launch a telescope. Because when it was first conceptualized, a lot of the technologies were not there. But then what happened was the budgets just burst its seams. What they budgeted earlier was not the budget that they needed as they moved on doing the project. So resources were required when the technologies came along. But to get these resources, NASA can't just dip into the honeypot and get the money. They have to go to Congress with hat in hand asking for money. But fortunately for them, there were certain stakeholders in that program who were instrumental in helping them get the money. So in doing so, you realize that certain stakeholders become more important because they control the resources required at that stage in the process. And I was watching a documentary on that, and they mentioned these people. Who are the people who were able to get the money for them? I think some senator, I can't remember his name right now. Some senator was very good in getting the money for them to make sure that the James Webb telescope, proceeds per normal. He was responsible for that. And this is what happens when you look at change, when you want to make a change. It's not a top-down approach. It is kind of a mixture, top-down, bottom-up, and then you're trying to get things done. Okay, everyone? Okay, before we talked about the article that I have mentioned in the subject outline, John Buchanan, you stab my back, I stab your back. I think it's got an interesting title. Before I talk about that, anyone has any questions? Anyone has any questions on that? Any questions, anyone? Is everything clear? Piao Jin done? Fun? All right. All okay? Gao Yu, Wu Heng, Zhao Yinan, Su Chi, all okay, good. All right, so this is what I'm going to talk about right now is I'm going to summarize for you what Buchanan said in his article. Okay, the full name of the article is available in the subject outline in my timetable. If you want to read the article in full, I would advise you to do that. Go and download it from the UCD library. And that article is about stakeholder management. It is about stakeholder management. All right. So what I'm talking about is, I'm talking about John Buchanan's article from 2008. We still use them, yeah, because some of these articles are interesting to read. Now, what Buchanan said is, sometimes when I interview people come, especially people who have been out in the workforce, they come to me for, during the job interview. And when I ask them, I said, why do you want to leave your last organization? They say, too much politics. Now, for me, that's not a good reason, to leave an organization. And Buchanan says that. Buchanan says, and he has researched quite a number of organizations, at least in his article, he says organization politics are a reality in most companies. There's no getting away from it. All right? There's no getting away from organizational politics. If you do not believe me, next time you go to a food court, just look, let it be a small food court. You have people who clean the tables, you have people who serve you, people who wash the dishes. Just look at the food court and you will see politics at play between all these different job descriptions. All right? Now, why do people play politics? Anyone? Why do people play politics in organizations? When you put people together, they like to play politics. Why? Why? Well, negotiation. Okay, negotiating for what? If you had read the article before you came to the lecture, you would know the answer. No, you're not negotiating for power. Power is a tool. Power is a tool that you use. So when you have power, you can call for negotiation. You can negotiate with the other party. But what are you negotiating for? Because people play politics in organization to secure resources. And this is what Buchanan found. All right? So according to Buchanan, this is not my words, it is necessary in order to secure resources. That's one of them. Maybe you have an idea. You want to make that idea a reality. Maybe you want to innovate. This is what Steve Jobs did. When Steve Jobs was in Apple, when John Scully was there, he couldn't do anything. John Scully was the CEO, and whatever Steve Jobs did, he wasn't too happy. So he rewrote his job description, and he became, like an iCEO. That's how the name iPad, iPod, and all those things came about. He became iCEO, and he put him in a building where there was nobody. He rewrote his description, his job description. And then he left. When nobody were reporting to him, he left. Steve Jobs left. And then Scully, the company was doing so badly, it was bleeding money, billions of dollars a day. So the board of directors fired Scully and invited Steve Jobs back. And then Steve Jobs had to play politics. Steve Jobs was a master politician. Maybe he learned from Scully, I do not know. But he managed to convince a lot of people to do the things that now they have become legendary. The iPhone, the iPad, okay, the iCloud. You want to innovate? Ideas. You can also, some of us, we want to achieve personal goals. Achieve personal goals. I remember once, the second company that I worked in, my boss, I had a boss, a marketing director at that time. Now, my boss wouldn't allow me to do a certain thing. But I wanted to do that thing because I thought, that might be a good thing to do for the company and also to give me visibility. But he was adamant against it. But this was not planned. I didn't plan it, but I was talking to somebody else at a party. It was end of the year dinner and dance. And I was talking to somebody else. They were asking me, what are you trying to do? And I said, well, Tony doesn't want me to do this, but I think, we should be doing this. And he said, why? All right. And I said, well, I think this will put us on the map, without actually coming out in front and said it will make me visible too. It was a personal goal for me also. And he looks at me, this person, he was at the same level as Tony, but he had more influence. He said, Morgan, don't worry about it. Let me take care of it. Okay. And he took care of it. And then the next thing I knew, the CEO says, Morgan, proceed. So you can use it. You can also play politics, even though I didn't plan it. It worked in that way to achieve personal goals. So you can do. People play politics for a variety of reasons. And I just gave you a few examples. So you have to know what is being done. This is why I say, be aware of what's happening in the environment. Too many people are too focused on the phone. They don't listen, they don't see, they don't hear. I do not know what they're looking at on that small screen. Everything that is very interesting is happening outside of that small screen. And then when something happens, they are lost. A long time ago, sometime, someone, I think it was one of my boss who told me, he said, Morgan, there are three kinds of people in this world. And I said, what are those three people? He said, the first kind of people is what you want to be, or what we want to be. Make things happen. He said, the majority of people, in fact, in those days, before the smartphone, that was the majority. The majority of people watch things happen. So the first group of people is make things happen. The second group of people is watch things happen. They watch things happen, but they don't do anything about it. The third group of people are the more dangerous ones because they wonder what happened. But now it looks like the wonder what happened is the majority because everyone is on the phone. So you need to observe what's happening around you. All right? Now, the purpose of Buchanan, so I've mentioned to you what he observed, that politics are a reality in most companies, and it is necessary in order to secure resources, innovate ideas, achieve personal goals, and so on. But the aim of Buchanan's research was to explore, well, he's an Englishman, to explore British managers' perceptions of organizational politics. That was his first aim, a major aim. But the second aim is to identify perceived antecedents of organizational politics. All right, what people do to achieve consequences. All right, and what he found is actually quite interesting. He said some of the things we talked about. Yeah, so now we are talking about how the practice is compared to the theory that we discussed earlier. Structural basis of organizational power. Okay, so structural basis of organizational power. And coalitions, that means people, constituencies, people you bring together, are used in promoting collective agendas. So people use structural power, situational power, and then they amass constituencies, get people to them to promote collective agendas. So it's not individuals, but it is more group-based. All right? But there also, what Buchanan also looked at was Buchanan also looked at a micro approach. So he looked at definitions. He interviewed all these people, or he collected surveys. He tried to find out what organizational perspectives are, or perspectives or definitions of organizational politics. And then he looked at the experience, subjective experience of those change agents or change recipients of politics. And the third thing he looked at were the implications with regard to behaviors or tactics and consequences of political behavior. That's what we looked at. So it's an interesting study. Go and look at it. All right? Now, there are also other studies. I'll just give it to you. There was another guy. Now, you can also find this in UCD library, Shanlat, and in 1997. Now, he looked at a few things. Now, he had a different perspectives. If you look at the timeline, it's about almost 10-year difference, yeah? Okay, 1997, 2008. Now, what he said was the triggers for politics or organizational politics. So triggers to political behavior lie with personal ambition. Okay, that is one of the reasons. When someone is ambitious, I want to reach that position, I want to be the CEO of the company, he will play politics. Shanlat did a research paper on that. Recently I was talking to someone, and he said, I understand that you're working with this person. I said, I know. And that person has already got me to do certain things. That person was playing politics with me. You see, I have enough experience, and my friend who wrote to me also have enough experience to see who are playing politics. But for me and him is, we want to see where it would lead. Do not think, because when we play politics up to a point, but we don't do it because, we are basically ambitious people. If I am an ambitious person, I would be working in a company, a big company. But I'm not interested in all those things. I'm more interested in technology. I'm more interested in implementing technologies to improve or change a company. That's what I'm interested in. So when he told me this, I kind of laughed and I told him, yes. And that person has already got me doing certain stuff. And he said, just be careful, he said. This person likes to delegate. I said, I know that. I said, you don't have to let me know. I said, I know that. I can see it. But I want to see where it leads to. All right? So political behavior lies with personal ambition. But it can also be, all right? And I get involved in political behavior because of the second reason. Unstructured problems, which cannot be resolved through simple decision making. These are complex problems. Complex problems are when you can do a thing in many different ways, and the solutions could be very different too. So when you cannot resolve it with a simple decision making, then I start playing politics. And there are a lot of such unstructured problems in companies. But I kind of enjoy solving those problems, and to solve those problems, I have to play politics. And then there is and structural differentiation. Okay, what is structural differentiation? When you look at a company, there are many structural levels. So certain people may have certain resources. So it generates competition for resources. Remember, I told you that story about the corporal managing the transport resources, how I managed to get transport. That is structural differentiation. He is at a lower level, but he manages these resources. There is a difference. People who do not treat him well may not get what they want. So triggers to political behavior lie with personal ambition, unstructured problems, and also structural differentiation. This is what Shanlat found out. Then you have another study which goes earlier than this. I'll give it to you. And that is Kumar and I do not know how to pronounce this name. I hope I pronounce it correctly. I don't even know how to spell it. E-A-U-X. I hope I've got the spelling right. Thibodeau or Thibodix, I'm not so sure. Okay, I'm not so sure whether it's French or whether it's Greek. Okay, but this is 1990. Not 10 years, maybe not a decade, but maybe about 7 years earlier. Now, Kumar and Thibodeau, what they talk about is they locate, they say the triggers of political behavior, triggers of political behavior, is related to organizational change. Whenever there are changes taking place in organization, there is political behavior. Now, they identify three types of change. The changes are what they call first level change. Maybe I should put that as A. Right? So first level change is involves improving effectiveness of the organization. Then you have second level change. Second level change, they say, involves introduction of new perspectives. And then you have third level change. New perspectives means new way of doing this, maybe involved in, use of technology. I usually get involved in second level and first level. I usually don't get involved in third level. Sometimes I do, but very rare, okay? Third level change concerns shifts in values and working practices. It is difficult to change somebody's values, right? It is very, very difficult. So where do you think most of the politics are being played out? Which one do you think, where do you think the greater the politics is? In which change do you think? Which change involves the greatest political behavior? Where people play a lot of politics. Which one? First level, second level, or third level? Which one? Anyone? Bauchi, Piao Jin Den, Wu Heng? Which level of change would incur a lot of politics? Yes, the third one. To change people's values. People will fight you. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to change my thinking? People would involve a lot of politics in third level change. And this is where you have to intervene strongly if you're a change manager, if you're doing this. During the, before the class, I also supervise certain research. And someone wrote to me, they are looking at psychological values. And for me, that is an alarm bell. Because how do you measure that? Because when you get involved in those areas, it creates a lot of complications. So what they argue is, right? They argue, Kumar and Thibodeaux, what they argue is first and second level change require political awareness and facilitation. If you are aware of what's happening, you can facilitate. But third level change, requires political intervention. All right. Political intervention in the sense it may involve debates, discussing, the issues, gaining support from key groups. All right. And some of the things that you might do may be objectionable, like I did that, firing of people, changing their positions. It may be considered objectionable, but you may have to do that to get things done. One example is, if you remember the space shuttle disaster a long time ago. Yeah, I was a student at that time. When that disaster happened, it was because of entrenched behavior in NASA. And they had to bring somebody from outside, to make a change. And what this person did, which he did, very well, is when they had this debate, instead of having square tables and, with a square table, usually the person who's the most senior will sit at the head of the table. He had a round table. I saw it. He did a lot of structural changes, to that debate or the meeting, and it worked well. And everyone only had their name in front of them, no title. So I can call anyone by their name. They wouldn't know who that person is. So you may have to intervene politically to change a lot of these things. All right? So when we look at this, so what Kumar and Thibodeaux found out was, what they found was that political behavior, or what most managers do. First, political behavior is precipitated. Precipitated means maybe, it starts off, precipitated by a combination of individual and contextual factors, and may not be self-serving. You're not doing it for yourself. It's just because the way the context is. All right? Now, the behavior repertoire, that means the kind of tools that you use in your behavior. Behavior repertoire of the organization, politician is diverse. All right? And social tactics, while social tactics may be perceived as more acceptable, most managers do not see ethical impediments to the use of political tactics. So behavior repertoire of the organization politician is diverse. But most people, most managers do not see ethical in the use of politics in companies. They think it is acceptable. All right? Now, the third viewpoint that Kumar and Thibodeaux found out was political behavior is not necessarily seen as damaging, but political behavior is perceived to generate both functional and dysfunctional consequences, both in the individual and in the organization. Functional means you can grow. Dysfunctional means there may not be trust. So you might find a company which may grow. You know, if you go to some of those finance companies like Goldman Sachs, you find a lot of these companies, they're functional, they grow, they generate a lot of income. But working in those companies, and I know people who work in those companies, they just can't take it. They last maybe about 2 years maximum, and then they leave because it's a very untrusting organization. And I know a few people who have been through that, and they said, my God, you know, he's glad or she's glad to get out of it. Okay? Anyone has any questions? I'm going to save this and I'll post it at the end. I've come to the end of the lesson. Anyone has got any questions? Anyone want to ask me any questions? I usually give about 10, 15 minutes for you to ask me questions here. So any questions, anyone? No? Everything is clear? All right, one last point, yeah? So I'm going to save this and I'm going to stop sharing this. Don't worry, I will post it onto the Brightspace this weekend. But I'd like to share something with you from the slides. You can go and have a look at it on your own. Okay, I'm looking for my slides, but I can't find my slides. I do not know where is my slide. Okay, let me pull out the slides again. Yeah, maybe I closed it just now and it just disappeared. Okay, so I'm pulling out this slide. Okay, so let's look at this slide. Let me share this slide with you. Okay, where am I? Okay, I'm going to share. Now, where is that slide here? Still can't find it. Give me a minute. Let me look for it again. Yes, found the slide. Okay, can all of you see the slide? Yes? Wu Heng, can you see the slide? Okay, I'm just going to scroll now. Okay. Okay, there's a stakeholder grid in your slide. It tells you, you know, when we say potential sponsors, we are looking at people who will support you in your change. When you say potential blockers, people who may prevent the change. And then you try to see where their power quadrants are. Those who give you strong support are champions. Those who give you strong opposition, they're blockers. Then you have weak support and weak opposition. So this is a stakeholder grid. And if you move down, it tells you what you need to do. So if you want to influence stakeholders to support the change, winning the support of those who oppose the change and have the power to influence the outcome, you got to move them to the first quadrant, the strong support. So you move the blockers to the first quadrant, and they give you advice. The one in black, you know, looks like simple, but it is difficult to do all this. But you have to you have to move the blockers to the first quadrant. If you look at the second one, if you can't do that, move them to the left bottom quadrant. Okay, and it gives you some advice on what you need to do. And then the weak sponsors, you got to move them to the first quadrant. So this is how it tells you. You need to get everyone into the first quadrant. What are the things you need to do? So this is what the slides tells you to do. Okay, go and have a look at this. I don't have to read through each one of them, but it is kind of self-explanatory on what you need to do. Bring in some new sponsors. You can do all these things. Is that clear, everyone? Is everyone clear about what I have showed you? I have nothing else to add. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to end the lesson. For those who are here today, thank you very much for coming for this afternoon's classes. Now, the next lesson is going to be a face-to-face. So I hope those of you who are in Singapore, and I hope the majority of you are in Singapore, I hope you can come to the class so that I won't feel so lonely. Yeah? Talking to an empty class can be quite depressing. So I hope you can come to the class, but please remember Friday's lesson. So the face-to-face session is on Friday, and it starts at 8:30. I do not know whether I can start on time. So if you're online, you're overseas, and you're not able to make it, if you don't see me at 8:30, please be patient, because I always have technical problems when I use Kaplan's things. So be patient. I will come on. I've had some bad experiences with those stuff, in one of the lessons which I conducted face-to-face a couple of months ago. So I hope everything goes smoothly, but we will get everything to, we'll get everybody on board, so you will listen to another lecture. All right, and once the lecture is done, over the weekend, I'll post the 3 notes that I've created onto the Brightspace, and I will not forget to post on 2 sites. Okay, I think one is batch 33, the other one is batch 34. Okay, Bauchi, too bad you are not here. All right, but you can at least, listen to me. I do not know whether you can see me, but you can probably listen to me from China. All right. Okay, that's all I have to add, everyone. So those who are coming over, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday. Those who are not, I hope you can hear me on Friday. See you on Friday, everyone. Take care. 8:30, yeah? Don't forget. It's in the morning. Okay, see you then, everyone. Take care. Have a good evening. See you on Friday. Bye for now.